Social media giant Twitter banning President Trump's account permanently further now, with Jim Anderson, who's the CEO of Social Flow, a tech company which helps media companies distribute its social content. He's Vice from New York. Thank you very much for being with us. So we already had a Facebook yesterday suspending Donald Trump's account until at least his term was over. Now Twitter permanently suspending him. He has 88 million followers on Twitter. This was, of course, as we've heard, the main medium for the president to convey his messages and even policies sometimes. How big of a deal is this? And what is your reaction to Twitter doing this?
Yeah, this is a very big deal. I will say it's had a sense of inevitability. You remember Twitter did temporarily suspend his account back on 2 days ago when the violent mob marched on the Capitol, and they required him to delete 2 tweets, and then they reinstated him and he made a few more tweets. But if you remember when they said that, they said further violations may result in permanent suspension, or language to that effect. And so, you think about everything we know about Donald Trump, he's not one to back down from a fight, for good or bad, depending on your point of view. And so it sort of seemed like this was inevitable. What's a little bit surprising is it seems like Twitter just got together, thought about it a little bit further, looked at what he had done, maybe the sum total of his tweets, and basically preemptively decided, because of the further threat of violence, as they said, we're just going to do this right now. We're not going to give you an opportunity to make another tweet that's in violation of our policies. We're just going to do it. It's also interesting that they did it on a Friday night sort of in the United States. So 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern time in the United States is sort of a very slow news time. So they picked an interesting time to do it as well.
How often does Twitter permanently suspend individuals on its platform? And are they on firm ground here when deciding to taking this stance and permanently ban Donald Trump?
It's more common than you might think. They don't publicly disclose those numbers that I've ever seen, but they do it routinely. And if you think about the cost, there's no cost to create a Twitter account. They're dealing with fake accounts and bot accounts, or real accounts when people just misbehaving all the time. I'd be willing to bet that they do hundreds, if not thousands, of suspensions a day. And they are on very firm legal ground, because this is a private service. It's a private company. When you sign up for Twitter, you agree to their terms of service. One of the elements of their terms of service is that they can suspend or permanently delete your account if you violate their terms of service. So they're really, their big issue has always been, he's the president of the United States. He's a duly elected politician. From a civic integrity standpoint, do you want to be in the position of muting the voice of a politician? And I think that's what's always caused them to stop short. After Wednesday, though, they now have a very clear example of where his behavior and his tweets actually contributed to real violence, where people got hurt and killed. And so it's a very different situation.
But, Jim, there's been a lot of discussion in the last few years about platform liability. To what extent is Twitter also responsible for the rise and for what we've seen in the Trump presidency, and that resulted in the chaos on Capitol Hill that we saw 2 days ago, and the deaths on Capitol Hill? They're responsible at some point, aren't they?
Well, it's interesting. There's a moral answer to that, perhaps, and a legal answer, and they sort of have different interpretations in each regard. I will say you've just hit on what is a very strenuous debate called Section 230 liability in the United States. Under the U.S. law, the tech platforms like Twitter have effectively a safe harbor against whatever content's being put out on their platform. As long as they adhere to a certain minimum set of rules, they are not legally responsible for what people put, whether it be the president of the United States or anybody else. That has been the subject of much discussion and debate. And I think in the incoming Congress, once we get past the inauguration and the new Congress takes its seat, Section 230 liability reform is going to be one of the top issues of discussion. And it's a very polarizing issue, because the Democrats think that the tech companies should do more to censor or mute this kind of content. Traditionally, Republicans have said, no, you don't have any right at all to try to censor or mute content from the right. And so they're very differing perspectives.
Right. And so do you think this could lead to some kind of litigation from Donald Trump and his followers? And what could he do in retaliation to some of these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, that have suspended him? Does he have the power to do anything within the next 12 days?
Well, certainly litigation, anybody can file a lawsuit about anything. So yeah, I suppose that's possible. Successful litigation, highly doubtful. I think there is, probably a concern that could he issue an executive order within the next 12 days? I mean, he's president of the United States. Could he, try to take, steps using the executive branch to do things? I think, one of the things that's very different today than was, say, Tuesday or Monday is, given what happened and the march on the Capitol and the violence and the deaths that happened there, I think his Republican support is very, very nervous. And so whether it be his advisors, and we've seen, tremendous number of, resignations or consideration of resignations. You've got the Congress, who's sort of a check on the presidency under our constitutional system. So I think he's got a lot less latitude in the eyes of those folks. Now, whether that actually restrains his behavior, that's what I think everybody, will have to wait and see.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Jim Anderson joining us there from New York. Thank you for your time.